not really recording. It's a sample thing.
And I have a question. People are going to.
I'm going to bring the meeting of Crescent City Commissioners together. My name is Vice Mayor Hazel Banks, and it's May the 10th, 2022 at 2 p.m. This meeting is official in business. Yeah, I want to call it to order.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, our order of business today, and I'm going to do the invocation and prayer. Father, once again, we gather before you to give you thanks and to praise and to lift up your most holy name. Father, we ask that you intervene with us and help us be together as this commissioner of Crescent City. Be example to the people that we are serving. Father, we ask these blessings in your son Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thank each commissioner, president, everybody absent, but our mayor, and she on assignment. Amen. Now today, excuse me if I say amen, I'm so used to saying it. Excuse me. Okay, our order of business, we done did vocation. We're gonna discuss today, and I'm basically gonna turn it over to our city manager to basically, he'll be the one conducting this meeting until we get ready to question each commissioner and open it to the public for their input, okay? At this time, we're going to be discussing number 3, that's the boat, RV, and trailer parking workshop. We have 9 commissioners, this is a workshop, and we do not vote on anything that converse here on today. It's just basically a workshop to get ideas from and input from our public. Okay, in the first order of business, consider changing to the code referring to the RVs and boats and utility trailers, the code. And we quite know that it's very outdated. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we changed our ordinance when we have to work on it. Make some changes. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, and he can give us cares further on in the meeting.
Thank you. So today we're talking about our code that pertains to parking of utility trailers, boats, RVs, so forth in the yard. And it came to my attention because I questioned it some months ago, and the response was, well, it depends on how you read it. So the way it reads, boats, recreational vehicles, utility trailers, and motorhomes shall not be permitted in front yards and shall not be permitted in side yards if the length of the boat, RV, or utility trailer, and or motorhome exceeds 25 feet. Or you could read it, there shall not be permitted in front yards, period, and shall not be permitted in side yards if the length of the boat, RV, utility trailer, or motorhome exceeds 25 feet. So in terms of the enforcement, it was a question of, are they allowed at all in the front, in your driveway, or does it depend on the length, overall length? So I put together some images just to give you some idea of a pop-up camper is about 10 feet. This is a 12-foot utility trailer. This one is 15 feet. This is a 20-foot trailer, and I put the tape measure on the floor, but it's not quite 25 feet. It's actually a 23-foot tape measure. So you can see 25 feet is actually a pretty good sized trailer or RV. So the question, the discussion today is, we want to clear it up. I think Commissioner Banks, you mentioned, why would I not be able to park my boat in my driveway in my home? So that's the discussion today. One of the things I looked at was if we were to clarify with the trailers and motorhomes shall be permitted in front yards and in side yards on designated driveways or improved parking surfaces of the residential parcel, if the length of the boat or RV trailer or motorhome does not exceed 25 feet. That would clarify it if you want to allow them in the front yard at all. Also, there's some language at the end that grandfathered in, I guess when this was passed, there was a concern that some vehicles had been registration prior to 2006, and it was recommended to me by the mayor that we maybe consider taking that out. Maybe that's anything prior to that would be abandoned at this point, and probably not working. But that'll be up to you, how you want to rework the language, or what you want the intention of this is to not allow it all in the front yard, and they can be on the side yard if they're small enough, or they could be in the driveway or other improved surface, as long as they're under 25 feet, either in the front or the side yard. This also requires that if it's in a corner lot, it can be in the backyard with a 6-foot fence. So I don't think it really addresses if you're mid-lot and you can get into your backyard.
Sorry about that.
$25.
And I've got Mark Koretz here, our planner. He's got some experience with other communities, how they have restricted trailer parking in some areas. I've lived in a couple HOAs where I had to put my pop-up in a storage. I pay storage. Even now I pay storage to keep my pop-up camper. I'm not allowed to have it anywhere in the property.
Okay.
So there's a variety of how you want it, what's the intention of the ordinance?
See, I happen to agree with Commissioner Banks. I think people should be allowed to park their RVs and boats and stuff in their yards. I don't believe that they should be parked on the front lawn, okay, in the front part of the lawn. And I think what's difficult is, you know, I happen to have a backyard, I put everything back there, I happen to have a 6-foot fence, and I'm all happy with that. But my question is, I don't really think that they necessarily have to have a 6-foot privacy fence. So I think anything that, you know, side yard, backyard, that's parked. I think some of the bigger RVs, maybe, and this is maybe if you consider, instead of parking it on the grass or whatever, you might want to put a little better foundation under them, especially if they're parked there for any length of time, but that's such as storage or something. I know that just my little trailer in the back is just on some grass where I pulled out some stones and it kind of sinks, and it's really not that heavy. Okay, so I think a big RV, you know, might kind of, you know, if it rains or whatever. You know, I've been thinking about a lot of this. You know, at first you're thinking, oh, you know, you shouldn't let it at all without the 6-foot fence, but we have a lot of people that have fences here. They're not privacy fences, but they're fences, and to keep people out or whatever, animals, bears, whatever. And we shouldn't have to force them to put a 6-foot privacy fence on, okay? But I don't think anything should be parked in front of the house. I think that it needs to be side or back of the house. And I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but it's a discussion.
Right.
So I'm open. I'm sure you guys are.
I would like, if I could, to get the gentleman that our city manager said will come up and you give us a, yes, thank you, sir. I didn't get the name.
You are correct.
Okay, you got it.
Communities have a wide variety of approaches. It's just based on, you know, what and how you decide your character is going to be. Most communities that do have restrictions do restrict the front yards so that boats and RVs are in side yards or rear yards. Some of them do say that they're allowed in the front yard if it can't be placed in the side or rear. And they specifically mention due to, you know, fixed fences, trees, that sort of thing. And of course, then it would be so that, you know, the RV doesn't extend beyond the property line of the RV. So you have a wide variety of choices in terms of how you want to proceed. But front yard restrictions and prohibitions are very common.
Okay.
Good idea. I'm gonna,
Could could I make a little comment?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I asked some questions of the city manager before we came to the meeting, and he put the answers in front of all of us. So I just wanted to highlight the first three. I asked him whether the city had received complaints about homes and lots with RVs and things parked on them, and he said yes. And then I asked whether the city has received any complaints that our ordinance is not enforced, and he said yes. And then I said, has the city received any requests that we change our ordinance to either to be more permissive, in other words, to go the other way? Some people want the ordinance enforced. So I said, has anybody asked that we change the ordinance to be more permissive? And he said, yes, the city has had requests to be both more permissive and to be less permissive to enforce this ordinance. So the $64 question to me is, how do the people who live here feel? I mean, I think appearances are important, but also how people feel is important. And I wondered if it would be possible outside of this workshop, maybe for us to do a survey of the residents at some point, depending on what we come up with, what we hear today, and what we discuss among ourselves. So anyway, I just wanted to share that I asked those questions, and that the answer seems to be, if I understand Charles correctly, that we have people on two different points of view. So we don't know how many necessarily. Okay, so that's all I want to say right now. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner West.
I agree with Ms. Burton that I do not like them in the front yard. It just seems, I won't say what it,
Does that include the driveway? You
No.
said front yard.
no, well,
It does if the driveway is in the front yard.
Front
I
yard.
really think that you have to, when I think side yard and backyard, you have your house and you have the corner of the house, you know, from the corner of the house back. It's fine, but not directly the front of the house. No. So that's, if you know what I'm trying to say.
right, then it's not in the front driveway or not.
I mean, we have a lot of people here, you
Yeah.
know, that do the recreational, they have your recreational vehicles, you have your boats.
Campers,
Yeah, the campers, and the other,
trailers.
the only other question I see two lake people here, and of course, lakefront is different than street front. And so your backyard really is a lot of times street front. If you see what I mean, it's your front yard is actually facing the lake. And that's something else to really kind of consider how you guys feel, how you would want to handle that, and maybe some input from I mean, this is supposed to be a workshop.
Yes.
And so hopefully we get some input from the crowd, you know, I think that's important. But the other thing I was thinking is for different reasons, a lot of times when people park, especially you know, on the corner lots or like along the driveways, we might want to consider throwing something else in there. You know, we can't put a garage or a shed without the setback requirements. We have a certain setback that these things need. In other words, you know, I think it's 5 feet. We may want to consider, you can park it, but you need a setback so that they don't feel, so the person that you live next to doesn't feel like you're encroaching on them a little bit to give them some space. I've seen not so much here in Crescent City, because I haven't gone out and done any surveys or anything, but sometimes people will park, especially a big RV, next to their small house, which is next to another small house. And their corner on that smaller house is only a certain amount of, feet away from the RV, and it kind of makes it seem crowded. So still on their property, but it's like right on the line. And maybe we want to do a setback kind of thing, 3 feet. I don't know. Maybe that's something to consider. I don't know if that's kind of clear what I'm thinking there.
I see what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I have a neighbor on a corner lot that has 4 vehicles, a trailer and a boat. And the lot is that large.
oh yeah, they tuck them in there, don't they?
They're tucked in.
Oh yeah, they're tucked in there.
Just put, that might be an issue for someone like that, though.
But it's
I
just,
see what
again, I'm
you're
just
talking
kind of
about.
throwing that out there for
Right.
comment and.
Next door, if you have a great big,
Let the Commissioner Vito.
Sure, yes, I agree, setback is definitely an issue. And as well, I looked at a couple of other ordinances and an article, and some other ordinances do address what y'all just mentioned. The number of, I guess, vehicles or the number of objects that you can have if they're, I guess, visible, if they're not behind the fence, for example, that they should be operable. In some way, they should be junk. And as well, some ordinances require that you not allow the grass to grow up in between. So it has to do with, appearance, and I guess keeping a storage like that that's visible from the street from looking like a storage yard in a residential area. But I agree with your raising the issue of setbacks. I think that could be very important.
Right. Commissioner, if y'all would allow me to, get some public input.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see how our citizens feel about it, because they the ones that they got the boats and trailers, and so, and I know everyone wants us to be a beautiful city. I understand that. But then again, basically, to me, I didn't do no research, so I really don't know when this order was first put out. But I don't think people had a whole lot of money to buy no boat when it was first originated. So we got people that moved in that got boats now and things, and we do want to be fair to everyone. I think that's more than right, but to be fair. If I go out and buy a boat, we ain't got no place like Palaca, Green Coast Spring, Orange Park, where you can take it and park it down in the lake, and, get the place for the park it down in the lake. So we basically got to put it on our land.
Okay.
So we want to be fair towards that too. So I'm going to just let us commissioners be silent for a little while and open it to the citizens.
Ladies first.
Can you pronounce your name?
me first.
Yeah. My name and your address, please, first.
Diane Sykes, 304 Chestnut Street.
Thank you.
I moved to Crescent City because it's not an HOA. If I wanted to live in an HOA, I'd have moved into a gated community. But I moved here because Crescent City's not, because I have the freedom to do what I want with my property. I warn you, I'm gonna put some home painted flamingos and geckos in my yard because I like things like that, and I'm gonna put up a fence to hang these on because I like kitschy little things. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about our community is that we have the freedom to be who we are and to express ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing, Christopher Coleman, 407 South Main Street. First, I'd like to say I agree with Commissioner Burke. A lot of us here, I'm quite sure, like, nice homes and have our yards looking nice. I wouldn't think it would be, okay for people to park their campers in front of their houses. Maybe on the side, in the backyard, stuff like that. This community, a lot of these folks, we have to realize a lot of folks are retired, including myself, retired, and guess what, now I want my toys, so I like to have those things in my yard and stuff like that, but I do have enough common sense to park them on the side and the back, and I keep the grass mowed around my camper, it's mowed, you know, so that might be something to think about, make sure if you're gonna allow it, keep your yards up, nothing's changed. You got a camper in there, boat in there, keep the yard up, keep the grass mowed around it. I too moved here because of the freedom. A lot of us, I came from Palm Coast before I came here. Palm Coast, it was a money wheel for people who had toys. They want you to store them. I was paying about $12,000 a year for just storing my toys. That's crazy. And I had a yard bigger than what I had now. I couldn't put anything in it. So, just want you guys to take that into consideration. In the back side, something like that is fine. And I know people who not have lots where they can do that. They can tuck them away and nice and neat. I say allow it. If they can tuck them away and nice and neat, keep them on straight around it, it'd be a good thing. But that's an excellent point. And I definitely agree with that. But it doesn't make sense to park your camper right in front of your house. Doesn't make good sense.
It becomes an eyesore, I think.
Exactly. Even though your house is looking nice and
Yeah, and
you
then
put
you-
a camper right in front of it or a boat in front of it, changes things. And as far as neighbors' homes, I mean, you might wanna, people got their property line, and I don't know if you can really say anything about people's property line, but when you're not on your property, neighbor's property, and a lot of times you wanna set it back a little bit because it's just courtesy for your neighbor. They don't wanna see a camper, look out their window, and you see a camper. But when you set it back. So,
It's good, that's a good point.
thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Next.
Melissa Wojcik, 2390 South Iowa 17. I come from a perspective where I've experienced all of the above things. I was on city planning in Fort Lauderdale and Board of Adjustments, and then I was on homeowners association when I was in St. Augustine. And I've, because of those experiences, it's difficult when you start to try and make rules that are about front yard, backyard, because there's so many non-conforming lots. There's also people, like in my case, I moved out of the homeowners association to actually come out here. And the first thing you ever want to keep in mind when I was on city planning and was on board is growth. We want to have growth more than anything in a city. So the last thing you want to do is start regulating people so they leave. They go somewhere else that doesn't have the regulations. We had almost 400 homeowners in the homeowners association in Oak Brook, and St. Augustine was growing really fast because they're bigger lots. But then they got a new board in that was doing all kinds of crazy, getting excessive with more regulation, and people started leaving and going to other HOAs that were not more lenient, even though they were HOAs. So one of the things I got on that association because of that, coming from a background of city planning. What they did when I was in city planning, because the lots were small, it's a small city called Wilton Manors, it's near Fort Lauderdale, and I lived on the water there. So same thing, you have the area that's towards the lake, most houses are towards the lake. So you pretty much can't park anything on that side of the house. Those were small lots. Here I have 2 acres, which is a whole nother distinction because there aren't a lot of 2-acre properties. So to pigeonhole a resident that's on a 1/4 acre with the same rules as someone on 2 acres, you can't see, to where their boat trailer might be parked or where their camper might be parked. Is what they wrote into the code in that circumstance was screening, hedges, So it doesn't matter if it's in the front, like when I was in Fort Lauderdale, I had a 28-foot RV and was allowed to park it, and there was only probably from here to that wall, because the lots are so small on the water and intercoastal in Fort Lauderdale area. So what they did is I put in like a front gate that was designed to open and close in my driveway, and then grew a hedge along the side, and then the hedge, it didn't totally cover the camper, but what they looked at it as things that are offensive in appearance. So if it was neatly parked along the hedge behind the gate, even though it was what would be towards the circle, it was fine. In the case of here with the 2 acres, the same thing. I have 1.5 acres before you get to my house, and then very little room between my pool and the lake. And I can't park my boat trailer in the pool. So you're basically parking, but no one, I have a 6-foot privacy fence around my whole yard. I have a 24-foot camper, which is parked on my driveway by my garage. That would be towards the highway, but no one could ever see it because it's a 1.5 acres. But beyond the fact that most people can't see what's in my yard, I feel for people who have smaller lots, because I've been in that circumstance where I've been in a city where I have a small lot, and it feels discriminatory to not let other people have a camper. And then you start to lose residents in the city. So I think as long as you can come up with these carports that sometimes people even put sides on the carport and hide some of their toys into a carport or screens or hedges, that the code was kind of written in a way that they used terminology of offensive appearance. If it's offensive appearance, then you can have the code officer go out and say, you either need to hedge or screen or move this. But it was basically not making the rules for so constricted that it doesn't meet all the different conformity of different people's lots. Because, you know, I can park a lot more stuff in 2 acres than someone else can park on a 1/2 acre or 1/4 acre in the city. But as long as they put a carport around their 4-wheelers and their boat trailer and their boat, and it's neat looking, then you gotta be careful that you're not just penalizing people who are keeping it neat. And there's other people that don't try.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Scott King, 1711 Avenue. I had a couple random thoughts. First of all, we realize when we look at a 20-foot trailer, that doesn't include the yoke. So a 20-foot trailer is 24, 25 foot long. So I mean, we gotta watch that. Also, if we're gonna talk about driveways, I got a driveway. There's no tar or concrete, but I got a driveway. So let's remember, if we talk about driveways, now we're paved. So keep that in mind.
Well, I did, and that's why I kind of mentioned that,
Yeah.
you know, we may want to discuss that if you're gonna store a large RV, and you know what I mean by a large RV, you want to do the big mamas, you know? We may want to discuss maybe putting something under it, and I'm not talking concrete or anything, but maybe some extra mulch, something to just kind of firm it up a little bit.
Yeah, but my point was more, we're talking about putting it on a paved driveway. And I'm just saying, let's be careful we don't say paved driveway, because I might put my boat on my unpaved driveway.
Yeah.
The other issue, which was brought up, you know, I was always thinking a little square house in the middle of the lot. And actually, we've got some of those, but we have a lot of other places. My house is over on one side with a separate concrete garage. I'm not sure. So I'm saying is we need to be careful. I think we need to be simple, because the more complicated we get, then the more it will or will not fit into different people's layouts of their home. The other thing, I should put my boat in the front yard. It's prettier than my house. Point being, you know, not everything is ugly, and not everything is an eyesore. So I'm not. you guys know me, I'm less government, less government, less government, so I'm kind of wondering, well, geez, do we have too many situations where really a boat parked in somebody's driveway is an issue? And I didn't go around and look either, I kind of doubt there are too many boats in the grass in front of people's houses, there probably is, I'm sure, but, you know, most of us, that just doesn't even work. Of course, then you've got the issue, which was brought up too, about, well, geez, what if I can't get to my backyard? My side yards are small or what have you. So I think we need to be simple. I think we pretty much all agree that in the middle of the grass in the front yard is probably not appropriate. I hope that we see our way to saying, well, geez, if my land vehicle can park in my driveway, then my water vehicle should be able to park in my driveway as well. I grew up in Cape Coral, Florida, which Commissioner DeVito mentioned, and that was one of those places where you couldn't park. That's where Palm Coast learned how to be Palm Coast, was from Cape Coral. And
You can't leave your car in the driveway.
oh, Cape Coral's terrible. When I was there, you couldn't have a pickup truck, and you didn't there. Your clothesline had to be certain size. And boy, I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. If this is where you're from, you really don't care about that stuff. If you're from somewhere way up north where it snows, that seems to be where that stuff comes from. Point being, this is the, what is this? The bass capital of the world. So, and I always tell people, we're in Crescent City. We're not in New York City, we're in Crescent City. So I think we should be fairly lenient. I think the whole idea here is, are you creating an eyesore for your neighbors? That's what we're talking about, because my boat's not going to violate anybody else's rights. I might get in it and violate your right, but it's sitting in my yard is not going to violate anybody's rights. You have a right to live, you know, in an attractive atmosphere. And even maybe attractive is too strong a word, but point being, yeah, I think we need to look out for ourselves, but let's not be too stringent. Side yard, backyard is great. Let's not measure from a neighbor's yard. That doesn't feel right either. If I am going to park something up against my neighbor's yard, he doesn't like it, he can build a fence. I mean, again, I bought the whole lot. I didn't buy just part of it. Part of it you guys own is by the road, but the part in the back that butts up against my neighbors, that's mine. That's mine. So let me park where I want back there. I don't think we have to worry about grass growing in between. Well, that's already covered, right?
Move it.
So that's covered. I think we ought to just get them in the side and the back and be done with it and use as few words as possible. The old one had too many words and it was ununderstandable. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you.
Don't want to step on the tape here. Kip Roddenberry, 229 South Prospect. I'm on the lake side, on the big lake, I like to call it. I kind of agree with many of the observations of the citizens that showed up, keeping in mind there's 1,200 of us. I think we represent about 1/1000th of the population, so please consider that.
Yes.
I agree with Scott in that I am 100% a private property rights owner advocate. When you place restrictions on property, and I'm speaking from experience now, from Audubon Park, Orlando, Florida, not far south of Maitland, where you were once at. And this happened, and they grandfathered in 18 homes in a residential area of 900 homes. Those homes increased in value much faster than the other homes because you were allowed to park RVs on the property unrestricted. That's not fair. All right, that's not fair. So
May I
when
ask
you,
a question?
Yeah.
Before you continue? When you say unrestricted, was that in the middle of their front lawn?
yes,
Okay.
because there was no law, no ordinance written when in about 1994, the city of Orlando, under the same similar motivations, said we need restrictions, and when they applied those restrictions, it gave rights to certain property owners that no one else got. So with my vote, similar to this gentleman, I had to pay thousands of dollars a year to store my boat. So my question is, who's gonna pay for that when we pass the ordinance?
Now, the ordinance, okay, I just wanna, you intrigue me because you're saying you're putting restrictions on it. Were those restrictions to not have it period on your property and you had to go put it in a storage area?
It started that way.
Because
and
that's
then-
not what we're talking about.
And then after the uproar, Commissioner Burton,
Yeah.
that's when these types of restrictions were placed. Vehicles and boats, RVs less than a certain length, you were allowed to put it on a side yard, but only if your side yard had a 6-foot setback. The homes and lots were so small that there was no way that was gonna work. So the restrictions themselves removed individual property rights that caused financial damage to the property owners. So under the new legislation just passed by the Florida State Legislature, where communities and commissions are responsible for financial damage done by the ordinances they write, I would think back on December 8th, 2006, when this ordinance was written, I'd do away with it completely and call it offensive appearance. If you've parked a big old ugly RV in your front yard, hit it with one of the other codes, not this code. All right, if it's an ugly appearance, and that can be very subjective, all right?
Yeah.
But I have to go back to the Supreme Court ruling in the 60s. We really can't define pornography, but you know it when you see it. All right, we can't define offensive appearance, but I know it when I see it. That's offensive. We need to do something. As I mentioned, my address, I have a neighbor. I don't know if you've been down to their property, but they are parking a camper in the front yard. It's been there for the 2 years and 2 months I've lived here. Nobody's done anything about that yet. It's in, quote, the front yard or the backyard. I'm not really sure how to define it. As you mentioned, on the lakefront property, what is the front yard? What is the backyard? So we get into, again, Scott King would define that. We get really into the weeds with this. It should be something simple, like the code says you can't have offensive appearance on your property, period. End of conversation.
That means you could not be in your front yard.
I like that. That's true.
I'm picking on you, kid.
That's true. In addition, our neighborhood, I'm not trying to rat him out here, has about, I guess it looks like maybe a 60-foot ocean-going yacht on blocks on the
Well-
side of the house. So I guess if we're having this much
We
of a
have,
challenge,
we have two sides to the story, and I think that I agree with both you and Scott. I understand the point that you're making. I also understand the point that other people make about how it is offensive, and that's why we're here to try and come up with something that meets somewhere hopefully in the middle.
well,
that-
agreed.
That,
As
you know,
long as we don't take away individual property owner rights to that property, because when we do that, we do cause a financial challenge to that property owner. You can no longer park whatever you want to on that property.
But the other side to that, Kip, is
Mm-hmm.
if you are parking offensive things on your yard, it takes away from the person that lives next to you in value as well. Okay, when people come in and they're looking to purchase anything, if something is that offensive, people don't, they come in and, oh, I'm not living here. So again, we're kind of there's two sides to everything. And
And
we're
then
gonna
why-
try and
why-
come up with the best possible solution.
Well,
So
with the
that's
time
why we're here.
remaining, I would just ask, why wouldn't that code ordinance be enforced? If it's offensive, it's offensive. We should all be able to agree to that, as long as when the code board violates the individual, something's actually done. You know, I mean, I hate to criticize, but we have a lot of code violations, but no enforcement. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're,
Can I read those for 1 minute, just short?
Yes, you can come back. This is a workshop, so we want to get all the
Yeah.
kinks out of it.
Get it out.
Kind of as a compromise between the two of them. And understanding it is expensive to have to rent where you would park something that's an eyesore in your neighbor's opinion. So if you get, especially a call or you deem by pictures that something's offensive in appearance, having that in the code versus front yard, backyard, side yard, it still gives the property owner more use of their property. But you then have the right to say, we would like it landscaped around it, or, so it gives a chance of, instead of them having to rent for 1,200, 12,000, depending on wherever, what you're parking and what you're renting, to put that money into their residence to beautify and landscape around what is considered offensive. So in case of where I was in the small lot in the Fort Lauderdale area, the hedge was expensive, but that's the option. Either go find a place and rent to put the camper, or pay for the hedge or the fence. So you're not taking away their rights completely if it's offensive, but you're protecting the other neighbor's rights by then being able to say, this is, we voted on it, this is offensive, here's some options. And they do make really tall RV carports, and you can get drop down side panels that drop down from the carport to completely hide if it's something that's being worked on, it's not beautiful, whatever. Some of the campers in our neighborhood and the HOA were like $300,000 campers. Mine's small, but even that's $150,000 because it's a Mercedes camper. So I wouldn't say it's offensive, but it shouldn't get more rights than somebody else to have a camper that can't afford that camper. But then they need to screen it if it's offensive looking.
Thanks.
Can you say?
Those ways too.
Yeah,
I don't, it doesn't sound like we're leaning towards having any issues with the backyard, but I will say, mine, for example, I had metal buildings built to put them under. So they're in the backyard, but they're not in the yard, they're in a thing. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, simple is better. And I didn't even think about the driveway carport issue. I forgot I had a boat under the carport for a long time. And never would have thought that as being an eyesore. That's in my carport. Now, granted, the carport doesn't even have lattice. It's just got 4 4x4, so it doesn't cover up anything. So yeah, there's another issue. If we're gonna work on that front yard driveway carport stuff, well, that gets pretty complicated pretty quick too. So.
If I may, something that comes to my mind in the communities I've served where we talked about things that are offensive, of how do we define, how do we legislate offensive? So if it's offensive to a neighbor, does our code officer have to act? Or if our code officer doesn't agree that it's offensive or junky or however, whatever we define, does she have to agree with the complainer just because someone on the street said that's junky or offensive? So you have to cite them. That's kind of why I brought this to you. I was getting comments saying, why haven't we cited these folks for that trailer? And then depending on how you read the existing ordinance, and people have talked about enacting, this has been enacted for quite some time. It's been the code. So when we get a call that says this is an offensive looking mess, we need to cite them, and the homeowner doesn't feel it's offensive, and maybe the immediate neighbors never thought about it, but someone went by, it's so, and I think Bob maybe could chime in when you put in the language, anything that's offensive or unsightly or ugly, how do we defend that, or by whose measure would that citation be issued? Yeah.
You
That
can't.
sounds like a board.
Yeah, but it's
Don't
within
let
the
the
fine
board,
certain
that's
number of
the board.
inches.
Commissioner May?
let's talk with that.
Yes.
Commissioner May? Could I be recognized? Thank you. 2 things. One, I thought we had really good comments here. But there are, just by my count, about 5 households here. And there's so many different opinions and there's so many different types of yards. I really do think that we should consider doing a survey of residents to see how people would be, to see what they think and how they would be affected by an ordinance, because we, other than counting how many calls have come in, we would really have no way to know. It doesn't seem to me that this is a huge emergency. It's something that we have on the table, but it's not an emergency. And the other thing is, I would really like to hear from our city attorney and our planner as to whether the idea of scrapping the current code provision and just putting in a fence of appearance would be workable. I would love to hear what they have to say about that. If that's okay with you.
Very good point. Very good point. Let's have some.
I don't think I don't think that would ever hold up. I mean, no, I think that would be overreaching. Because if anybody ever appealed it to a court system, that's gonna get, we would have no way to justify the evidence that built up the belief that we determined that somebody else's property was offensive. I don't think that would be a good idea at all.
Yeah, and it'll put the code person, whoever got that job, put them kind of on the fence.
And I mean, you may be able to have something that it's in working condition or something like that, but it can be. I mean, you can measure it. I don't know if offensive is like the Supreme Court opinion used. Obviously, we could go out. If all of us went out and looked at something, we would all have different opinions if it was offensive or not. So I think that's kind of hard. Maybe if it was, you put in there that it was in working condition or movable condition or operating condition or something like that, just so people don't have like a motor home that doesn't even have a motor in it, or a boat that doesn't have tires on the trailer or something like that, may be workable.
Registration,
Yeah,
is it an
Yeah,
active registration?
Yeah, that's another, that's a good point.
We have junk car.
That's all.
Junk
yeah.
cars.
Yeah.
Junk boat.
It is.
I think that the reasonable appearance is a standard that they said, and the offensive appearance is a standard called reasonable person standard. And there's a legal terminology that protects using language in code, which is based on a reasonable person's opinion. What they had in that city was they had a code board. So if it was brought to the code board as being offensive, then the pictures were brought out, or the board would go either view it personally or get pictures, vote on it. If the person still appealed, what the suggestion from the code board would be, whether it's to landscape it, to fence, giving that person options, and then you choose those options, then it went to the commission. That was the procedure that we had.
Lisa Roddenberry, Teaching Minds South Prospect. My opinion on this one is that you can have your RVs, you can have your boats, you can have whatever, as long as it's not in your front yard.
I agree, Lisa,
Yeah,
because we get too picky.
you're right, too
Everybody,
technical.
Just don't put it in your front
Front
yard.
yard.
Don't put it in, you want to keep it simple.
Yeah, we want, I agree with that. We really want to have it kind of simple. Then
I was going to say that when public is over, but when we get too tic-tacky with it, it's just hard to legislate it, to make it fair. And
Right.
it's difficult with,
We could break that sentence into two sentences: shall now be permitted in front yards, period.
right,
Shall not be permitted in side yards if greater than 25 feet.
No, basically.
well,
I
your
think,
side yard might be long.
Side yards and backyards, anything goes.
So just
Right.
remove that whole
Right,
reference to
Anything
side
goes,
yards.
side yards, backyards, you can put anything you want in there. Right, if you can fit it, you put it in there. You know, it's-
Well, how setbacks are?
well, I have a neighbor that has chosen to have a very small house so that they can have a boat and a camper. And that small house has a small yard. And it's right there on the corner, not in the front yard. It's not offensive, I don't think, but they discussed it and said they wanted a smaller house, less upkeep, so they can retire here and play. And that's what we want. We have a lot of people like that, you know?
Well, personally, I don't think we should get technical. I don't stay right where I stay, basically park a yacht out there if you want. Because, you know, I don't have that much traffic, but we don't want to get technical, so we won't be able to have people come and buy a home in Crescent City on account of the rules, you know. We want to kind of catch that out, but then still, we don't want to have our yard looking like a junkyard to make people stay away.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
in
right.
In some respects.
Is there an ordinance already about junk cars? I don't know how to jump back up.
Well, I think,
I'm not gonna call them junk cars.
They have to
It's
have
like
a
an
current
operable
tag
car.
on
Tag
it.
on it.
They have to have a current tag.
But does it have to run? Does it have to have tires that aren't flat?
We don't have that on the ordinance.
Just registered.
you know, Lisa, that what you're bringing up is, that's something else that we actually, it's not for this because we're talking RVs and campers, but it is, I think, a subject that we at some point have to address.
You're gonna have to.
Because there's an awful lot of cars, in different things, tractors, cars, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. I see it over here. The one that kind of kills me is over there, what street is that? You come by and there's all those little sports scoops all lined up, like, I don't know if he fixes them, I don't know what he
Dr.
does.
Love's house.
I have no idea, but it's like, what's going on here, you know, but yeah, I don't know, he's got a ton of them over there.
Yeah, 308.
Yeah,
308.
yeah, it's just, there's just a ton of them.
Yeah.
So,
good.
yeah, we are gonna have to, I think, address that in some.
We're gonna have to address that, sure enough.
When
Yes,
you put when you say put them in the backyard versus put them in the front yard, part of the problem with that delineation is that you're kind of randomly making a code that now the person whose backyard backs up to their backyard has to look at it versus someone may not be in the front yard. That's why the screening, fencing, landscaping added to the code protects everyone. because,
we
you know,
can't talk to just every single, thing that might happen, okay? What we can do is make a general, I think, and pretty good guess as to maybe 95% of the people here that live here in Crescent City do have a backyard, they do have a side yard, they have a way of getting their toys, if you want, into their backyard, wherever they need to put them. But we can't, there's always gonna be the one or two that
Just don't fit.
that can't do it,
Can I
and they need to come talk
pick, can I pick on
and
Kip a
see how we
minute?
can help.
Kip, I'm gonna pick on you.
Yes, ma'am.
Your front yard to me is your front door, but actually it's your lakeside.
Yes, it's.
All right, if you don't park your boat at your front door, you have no yard to park it in. You have a beautiful yard that goes deeply, a deep steep down to the lake, and there's no parking anything back there. So if you have a boat or a camper, you're gonna have to come down. You're not gonna get it in your garage, it's gonna be on your front door. So there's an exception that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm saying that the code being
Yes.
landscaping, screening, fencing, whichever yard, front or back.
Well, I
it
think that would
protects
be
all the
difficult
neighbors
for him
around that
because
house.
it would be at his front door too.
But it would also, the way that the lake, because the lake is your front door, his stuff's already in the backyard, if you know what I mean. It's kind of in the backyard.
My stuff's already in our backyard.
Yeah, it's already kind of in the
As a
backyard,
matter of
so.
fact, I remember our house, just specifically, our house is on one lot, then we have another lot,
Yes.
and then we
And
have another
actually,
lot.
we can't see your trash
There's always-
down there, but the point being, it is as you're coming down your front door, is facing that, and if I had a boat and a motorhome and lived in your home, it would have to go at your front door.
But it's definitely, you know, there's always exceptions, and those exceptions can be brought. And, you know, to the city and spoken about and see if I'm pretty sure that we can come up with some type of exceptions. I mean, there's always exceptions to the general rule.
And there's a property on Lake Avenue that's number of trailers in the driveway because the lakeside is the front yard, so they're in the backyard, but
Yeah.
they're
Yes,
between the road and the house.
So it
They're
looks
very
like
prominent.
front yard does.
and so these things that, you know, it's an individual kind of thing that that we have to, you know,
That's what I'm saying, I don't think by saying.
nothing's set in stone.
Back
No,
or front
no,
yard,
no.
because you have a lot of.
It's a
people
workshop.
Back up to each other, so if you're having a company into your backyard and it backs up to someone else's backyard and they don't have to screen or fence, then that's gonna be what you see when you entertain in your backyard, because those backyards would back up to each other. So my point of writing in the code, screening or fencing, if you choose to park those things on your property, that wherever they're parked on the property, you have to have them screened or fenced or landscaped, so it's not offensive to that neighbor. Because if it's in the backyard, you've got neighbors in your backyard, when they're entertaining, maybe they have a pool and they want people over, and they're looking at your, 28-foot camper, well, they're, same thing. So it should just be really about screening that particular item or a couple items that they're having, or fencing a whole yard, if you want to keep it, versus picking a yard, and then it doesn't help your neighbor whose backyard backs up to your backyard.
Well, Commissioner, I really think we got some input from our citizens. I think now one idea I want to bring up, and I think was very, very good for us to do this survey. And I think that would help us determine, because I just like I foresaid, we really don't want to get too deep in this. So we run the people away. So what we want to do is maybe do the survey, then take the survey, then come back before we make any decisions. How we want to go.
Well,
Now, I'm gonna talk to you.
well, let me ask you this question. Thank you. Let's say the survey comes back and it says, well, we got 100 properties out there that are just a mess, okay? And now what are we gonna do? We're gonna talk about it again? If you go out and say, well, I got 5 properties that have problems, are we gonna come back and spend another day talking about what we're gonna do with this again? I mean, I think we realize that we have an issue. I don't think we necessarily have to take a survey. We need to settle it. We have the issue. They have enough complaints that come in from people that don't like it. We have the other side that says, hey, whoa, wait a minute, okay, we got our rights. And that's what the discussion, that's why we're here today, because of that. And I don't know what a survey would actually do to help us make this decision today.
Well, one thing I know about the survey, but it's not the majority of people stay in the city. I think we got 1,535 people staying in the city. And I don't think but about 10 of us here today. So we had to bear that in mind also, Commissioner. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm asking the question.
You're right.
Commissioner Banks, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
I think to follow up on your idea, there aren't that many of us here. There are other people in the city. Many of them who could not be here today because they are working. And some of these vehicles that are in the yards are work vehicles, particularly the trailers. We've talked about a number of general concepts. So my understanding of what would need to happen here is that we would have to have some professional staff person draw up some kind of initial ordinance. But I agree with Commissioner Banks. I think it would benefit us to do a survey, not a review of properties, but a survey of people who were not able to be here to let them give their opinion or say what their situation is. Because I don't think we could consider ourselves anywhere close to having an ordinance complete. I mean, a professional person is going to have to draft this ordinance. And I can't see us, somehow I just can't see us figuring it out on one draft. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, that's my view on it. I would just certainly like to let the rest of the people in the city have an opportunity to say what their situation might be. so that the professionals can.
We can
take that
certainly put out
information.
we can do a survey monkey, put it out on the website, social media. There's no way to restrict it to only city residents, so we'll get regional responses.
Can't you restrict it to residents?
We can ask, do you live in the city?
Can't you ask for their address?
We could ask for their address. They don't, unless the survey, we throw it out, if they don't include their address, we'd have to pick through responses. But we're just looking at this paragraph, revising this paragraph. And from what I'm hearing, the consensus has been, not allowed in the front yard, they're allowed on the side and the back. And that's it. That's a pretty simple revision. And so we would have an ordinance that would revise 3.5.14 to read as follows. And be pretty straightforward. We can put out a survey and bring you those results in June. And you can see, what the responses are. We can send you a draft of the survey questions, so we get some agreement on what it is we're asking people, how they feel about parking in the front yard, parking in the side yard. Do they need to put a 6-foot fence in the backyard? How do they feel about, the different things we talked about today, and then bring you those results and you can do it.
If you treated all the yards the same as this part of the code that talks about corner lots, and it says it doesn't matter what you're parking there, but then there's a 6-foot fence. If you address the same way, the front yard and the backyard, and you just have the code consistent, then for people that have the different scenarios, it covers all the scenarios. Either you put up a 6-foot privacy fence, a 6-foot hedge, or landscaping. No matter where you put your RV or your boat, that just simplifies the code, doesn't discriminate against people whose yards are backwards, forwards, or sideways, where their house is compared to anything else. It just simplifies the code. You screen wherever it is. You put it in the backyard, then you fence the backyard. If you put it in the front yard, you fence the front yard.
Well, we don't allow a 6-foot fence in the front yard right now, so we'd also have to revise those.
Even with a setback of 25 feet or something on the front.
Nothing forward of the house, in front of the house could be.
Well, in the case like my hedge that was in the city in a small yard, and I was in front, towards the circle of the subdivision. The 6-foot hedge came up, and then obviously the front was a lower gate, like a 4-foot gate in the front. And that, that can be put in there as a setback for the front yard, just like your setback, whatever it's gonna be for the backyard for the fence. But you put a 4-foot picket fence, or enclose it and 6 foot on the side, it's gonna visually be more appealing to that neighbor who has it sitting there.
I'm sorry, most of what you're saying means that the thing that we're putting in the yard is ugly. Okay, that's gonna be more rare than common.
Can I say
I
this?
can put something on my back.
Oh, just a minute, let's come to the mic, though.
Yes,
She
sir.
got to put this down in the minutes, so.
Yes, sir, thank you, Scott King, 721 Lemon Avenue. I really don't want you guys telling me I have to build a fence. That's counterproductive. We're putting it in the backyard so that passerbys, walkers, drivers, visitors drive by and look at our beautiful town and see, nice houses, hopefully with yards cut and whatnot. And that our toys, pools, kids, junk, baseball bats, and all that mess is in the backyard where we live, where we spend our time. And if my neighbor's back there doing the same thing, probably that's not going to, my pile of toys or my parked boat isn't going to offend him while he's mowing around his parked boat. I mean, somewhere we got a place to put our stuff. And if you're gonna make me build something around my boat, I'll guarantee you, right now, my metal buildings are not as attractive as the things that they are covering up. So sometimes I think we're looking at this like the things that we're talking about are ugly, and very few of them are. If we're talking about discrimination, let's not discriminate against the working man who's putting his work trailer in the backyard, you know, he might need to be feeding his family, not building fences around his.
Good point, good point.
I have something to say to that. If it's a working trailer though, it's not storage, so it
Can
can
you
be.
come up to the mic, ma'am? So we-
You go, Vice Mayor.
I know, it's around there, you guys. If it's a working man's trailer, if it's a working utility dealer, it's not being stored, so therefore it's routinely moved. But a trailer that you're not working with, you're not moving, you know, it should be stored, but if you've got something, you cannot, yeah, I agree with you. The working man needs to be able to work, and he doesn't need any additional hassles about having to park it by the side. If he wants to park by the side, that's cool, but we're talking about storage, we're talking about storing
Ones
items,
that sit
right?
there
It's not talking about people who.
that are not.
So it's just.
Well, there is a big
Well, it
difference.
moves.
They're,
My boat goes out every
Yeah.
weekend.
But,
Well,
you know,
from,
thank you.
from what I'm gathering off this sheet of paper that I got here, same thing. That don't even come into play on this order. Am I right? Is I'm right about the ordinance, what we talking about, we talking about fencing in and doing all this now, that don't come into play on this stuff.
This mentions for corner lots.
On that, right.
In the case of a corner lot, boats and motorhomes, regardless of length, may be stored in side yards, provided that the yard is enclosed by a 6-foot privacy fence. That just stipulates a corner lot, so if you live mid-block, you don't have to put up a fence currently.
Right, yeah, cause we gonna be going in people's pocket, we gonna talk about fences and all like that, so we wanna stay away from that for as we can.
But it's cheaper than renting a storage place to put your
Right, but
vehicles and improves the property value.
okay. So go ahead and we gonna
Yeah, I just want to
bring it
clarify,
in.
just want to clarify one thing, just the current ordinance seems to read not any distinction between parking and storing. It just says, shall not be permitted
Yeah.
in side yard or front yard. So, am I correct in this, Bobby, that our current ordinance, there's no difference in parking and storing, it just says permitted.
That's
So,
correct.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you, Commissioner Ray. I'm done.
Okay.
I have something to say. I won't pick on you, Scott. You are not my best friend, okay? So we know this, but I'm going to defend your backyard. He's on a corner lot, his backyard backs up to someone's front yard. Because your house's faces this way, their house faces to the west. So if we leave that, you'll have to build a fence.
Yes,
And
that's not what we want to
and
do.
we don't want that is what I'm considering, and I'm to make it clear, we are not friends. So what I'm saying is, I think the fence thing is going to be just as offensive as trying to legislate what's front and backyard totally. Because your front yard is your lake, you know.
And I have the whole backyard attached.
Yeah, and your whole backyard faces the community.
The road, yeah.
So it's gonna be difficult, and we have so much of that on the lake, both lakes. I think we're gonna run into a lot of difficulties if we do that. I like the idea that things aren't parked in the front yard. I also don't like that a lot of our citizens pull their car right up to their front door. They didn't used to do that. They do that now. I don't like it, but it's gonna be hard to legislate it to not happen. So if we could just do, if possible, if there's room in the side, in the back, the boat, the motorhome, the trailer should be in that area.
Beyond the edge of
Beyond
front
the
edge of the house.
edge of
Yeah.
the front of the
So
house.
side and
I
the
think
back,
that'd be most simple.
and that's any size. I mean, we don't need to distinguish really what size. And the only other thing that I kind of suggested, and it didn't go very far, but was the kind of setback, maybe that depending upon trying to give people, a lot of times people just
Your
Like
neighbor
a little,
respect.
yeah, they just kind of, yeah, it's a little bit of respect for your neighbor that says, hey, you know, I'm not gonna pull right up, you know, an inch away from our line kind of a thing. But I don't even think you need that. You just need to get everything in the side yard and the backyard.
Then you want to worry about the setback.
Yeah, and not worry about the setback. I mean, if you're responsible, you're probably gonna have the setback anyway, because you wanna get into the trailer somehow, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to have a little bit of space, so. I think it should be that simple.
Well, I
To
think
be
I
done with
think
it.
it's
I don't think we
language.
need a survey, and I don't think we need anything, I just think.
I
that-
agree, I just make it simple
Yeah,
so that it's just, if it ever possible, no front yard.
Okay,
all right.
commissioners, y'all think we done did enough workshopping? Okay,
I move we adjourn.
can I get a second?